Spectator Sports. We have so much content to break down for you guys today with the World Cup, the NBA, and Week 11's action in the NFL. But before we get started, please like and subscribe to the page. It makes a massive difference in the YouTube algorithm. And we have daily content now with our TikTok and Instagram pages, so give that a follow. Link is in the description. So to start, the Cleveland Browns took on the Buffalo Bills, and this game was originally supposed to be in Orchard Park, but a blizzard had to reroute this game to Detroit, and it sucks because I was really excited to see a Snow Bowl game, and that would have been very fun. I know Bills Mafia would have loved to be there too, but them and the team traveled still very well to Detroit, and this actually works out really well for Buffalo as they're going to be playing the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving Day, and this means that they can just pack a bag and they'll probably be there for the week and then get acclimated to the area and then head back after their game. Josh Allen had a turnover-free game, and it was definitely a good sign to see as he's been dealing with bad interceptions, fumbles in the last 2-3 games, particularly with red zone interceptions. They were down early in this game, but they had to find a way to come back using a Stephon Diggs go-ahead score. And after that, they were firmly in control of this game, and I was happy to see that the Bills were able to implement a running attack. We know that the Bills definitely have issues with running the ball consistently using their running backs, but it was nice to see that Josh Allen didn't have to be the leading rusher for this game as well, as he's basically the entire offense, and without him, the Bills are entirely screwed for this season. Including Devin Singletary, who's their lead back. They got some good production out of James Cook, who's actually Dalvin Cook's younger brother. They both had 86 yards on the day, very impressive stat line, and overall also on the defensive side of things, that defensive line has been playing lights out the last couple of games. We remember that goal line stand that they had against the Minnesota Vikings. That was a game-winning performance by their part for sure. Unfortunately, a lot of events happened after that we don't need to get into, but they had a key sequence in that third quarter where the Browns were in scoring range trying to make this a game, and they stuffed a couple of Jacoby Brissett QB sneaks, and Jacoby's definitely a bigger guy, so it's not easy to hold him back just to get probably like a few feet, but they still stonewalled him on both attempts, and after that the Bills were in firm control of that. Big stop on fourth down in particular was Jordan Phillips, as he's been pretty good this season from the defensive tackle position. And overall, their defensive line, like I said, has been really great. Matt Milano is back now, healthy for a couple of games, as he's going to be a key piece. And they're going to also slowly work in Tre'Davious White. Jordan Poyer's been in and out of the lineup, but when he's healthy and available, that's pretty good signs with this Bills defense. Now, the Bills have an interesting slate of games. Obviously, we talked about them playing the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving. They followed that up with a Thursday night game against the New England Patriots, and then 2 key home games against the Jets and the Miami Dolphins. Now, they're already 0-2 in this division, so they really have to run the table and finish 4-2. Especially beating Miami is going to be super key to them getting the division back in their favor, and also their sights set on getting home field advantage. Just right now, they're still a game back too of the Kansas City Chiefs. And the way it's looking out, their schedule is definitely more difficult than the Chiefs is going forward. So they're going to have to hope that the Chiefs drop a game even too and make sure that they win out to ensure home field advantage throughout the playoffs in Buffalo this season. For the Browns, I did want to give some credit to receiver Amari Cooper, as he had a really nice day with 2 touchdowns, a great day in terms of receiving yardage output. And if their skills positions that we've seen continue to play like this, once their quarterback returns to the lineup for the last 5 games of the season, and then under a full year in the training camp and a full season at their disposal, the Browns will be definitely a very elite team next year. And I don't know what exactly they're going to do with Coach Evan Stefanski, but I think he's a good head coach. He's had issues obviously with Jacoby Brissett and then Baker Mayfield, as those are not the most talented quarterbacks. With him getting a more stable quarterback next year full time, I think that's something to bring him back and have him utilize that offense at its fullest capacity. Now, the Detroit Lions took on the New York Giants, and they scored a remarkable upset. Now, this is their third win in a row, and this goes to show that the Giants are truly going to be playoff pretenders more than playoff contenders. Some of it is obviously due to their injury issue. They just lost another receiver to a torn ACL, and the receiving room is already decimated as is, so it's just so hard to get any type of production. But also, quarterback Daniel Jones is just not cutting it. He had a couple big turnovers from interceptions, and he's just not adequate to be a consistent starter in this league. So next year, they've exceeded expectations, so I don't know what exactly they're going to do in terms of getting a new quarterback, but they could trade for somebody and plug and play that and then shore up the receiving room and hope that they stay healthy. Saquon Barkley is definitely the epicenter of the forefront of this offense, but clearly when he is shut down, their options really run dry. Their defense is admirable, but they also have sustained injuries. Adoree Jackson's going to be missing time now with an injury to his knee. So overall, the Giants have been a good story this year. I still think that given their hot start, they'll be able to make the postseason, but it'll be a very short stay, and they'll continue to build on that in the offseason as Brian Daboll heads into year 2. The Philadelphia Eagles are coming off a Monday night loss, and that means that a lot of people around the NFL circles are questioning their legitimacy as a true title contender. Myself personally, I think that the Eagles have been the most consistent team throughout the league. They had a really bad day against the Commanders, and give it the credit to the Commanders, they were the better team that day. And they made some adjustments immediately. They got gashed the last couple of weeks from the running game, so Howie Roseman decided to bring on Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. Both had great impacts in this game. Despite a shaky first drive when Jonathan Taylor had 7 rushes for 49 yards, but after that, completely shut down. He only had 35 yards off of 15 carries, less than 100 yards on the day from him. I think that's a great win for them and good adjustments to Jonathan Gannon for making those adjustments after the opening drive. There's been a huge adjustment that the Eagles have to work on now, is that Dallas Goedert is going to be missing about 4 weeks due to a shoulder injury that he sustained last week against the Commanders, and his replacements, Tyree Jackson, Grant Calcaterra, and Jack Stoll, they were all penalized in the first half for different penalties at different moments in the game. So replacing that production, who a tight end was probably going to make the Pro Bowl, possibly be up there in terms of a top 3 tight end in this league. So making up that production is big, because Jalen looks for Dallas Goedert across the middle as a safety blanket, and that's really what a tight end is supposed to do. So as he recovers from this injury, it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles adjust, as they'll have to lean on the running game and also ask more out of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, etc. And good adjustments from Jonathan Gannon, who made some adjustments after that shaky first drive. Now, offensively, they had some issues. They had a couple turnovers, one from Jalen Hurts, and then A.J. Brown had a fumble. Only had 3 points going into the fourth quarter, a season low, but when they really needed a drive, Jalen Hurts really delivered the goods. Facing a 6-point deficit, they needed to go the full length of the field, and they ran a classic fourth quarter drive that they've been doing the last few games of this year, where Jalen Hurts really got going with his legs, and the running game overall was established. That is the strength of this Eagles team. He had the game-winning rushing touchdown, pretty much sealed the deal there. In the second half, their defense is being very productive in terms of clamping down on offenses. Only field goals in second halves. That's pretty remarkable. And the same thing happened here when they had a couple key third down stops, forcing the Colts to settle for field goals rather than touchdowns. Particularly on the Colts last drive, there was a couple key sacks. Hassan Reddick got in on the action, and Brandon Graham, who atoned for a previous mistake that he did last week with that questionable late hit on Taylor Heineke. So good for him, good for this team. I think morale is boosted for this team. I think that getting a really push by probably a more mediocre team in the Indianapolis Colts is a good scare to have. And now they're going to continue to build on that as they face Green Bay next week on Sunday Night Football. The New York Jets took on the New England Patriots, and it was really exciting towards the end, but most of this game was a snooze fest. We saw a lot of great defensive plays. The Jets had issues executing in their passing game and really didn't have much to do of anything on offense. New England side had a decent day offensively. I think Mac Jones has definitely become more of a game manager rather than a franchise quarterback. He did make some good plays. There was issues in the kicking game. A couple kicks were missed or blocked, and there was a lot of wind going on that impacted a lot of games on the East Coast. So those swirling winds had a factor for sure, but still, regardless, the bigger side of this was the ineptitude of Zach Wilson and this passing game. The Jets defense has proven to be a unit that can carry this team to victory. We saw them shut down the Buffalo Bills a couple weeks ago. Sauce Gardner and Quinn Williams have been elite at their respective positions. But still, Zach Wilson hasn't lived up to that number 2 overall pick and made those leaps that he's supposed to do from year 1 to year 2. We saw on his pro day he was drifting to the left and just uncorked a dime of a throw that traveled probably about 60 yards in the air, and that made scouts eat up that tape. And I think the Jets really fell for that when they just wanted a good quarterback. They were trying to replace Sam Darnold. I really believe that Justin Fields has been the best QB in this 2021 class, but they decided to go with Zach Wilson for whatever reason. And he's shown some signs of progression, but still hasn't made enough leaps to be an elite quarterback. He is great in terms of an arm talent, but decision-making accuracy have been his Achilles heels. Here you can see he misses an open receiver, and then in the next clip you see here that he just misses an open Denzel Mims streaking towards the end zone. So these mishaps and lack of going through the progressions has been an issue. I see him really using his arm but not really going back to his mechanics and utilizing his legs and setting up a good foundation. Back-footed throws, a lot of inaccuracies there, and it's led to interceptions. Now, he didn't have any interceptions in this game, but typically in games against New England Patriots, he's been lackluster, and it showed up today. There was a couple really good interceptions that they had, but defensive backs dropped it. That's definitely why they play defensive back, not receiver, but still a lot of turnover-worthy throws. So, and his attitude as well. I mean, we saw Garrett Wilson voice some dismay after the game, and it seems that Zach hasn't really shown accountability. You can see here.
Feel like he let the defense down at all?
No.
He decides to not really hold himself accountable. He thinks that due to the offensive issues on Sunday, it wasn't really their fault. The defense had a game-winning performance, but he declines to say that the offense let the team down, which definitely they did. It's not even close. So Zach really needs to improve, because if he finds a way to allow this team to completely flame out of the playoff race, I think the Jets have to go back and look at another quarterback, whoever it may be, as this window now is getting kind of open for the Jets. They have pretty good pieces on offense, and them depending on Breece Hall, who's out for the year with that ACL injury, has been a huge blow to them. But they can plug in a quarterback that is definitely more competent, has some accuracy, and really implement that into this Jets team, couple that along with that elite defensive unit. I think they have something in New York. Davante Adams totally cooked the Broncos secondary, especially on this game-winning score you see here. They had some issues really covering him, as he really had his fingerprints all over this game. Again, I think that both of these teams are out of the playoff mix, but still can provide some entertaining football nonetheless. And Derek Carr had a pretty solid game responding from those early mishaps that he's had this season, but still the issues still go back to Russell Wilson and the Broncos, where there's an interesting sequence where Melvin Gordon, who's had issues fumbling the ball, had a near touchdown but fumbled it, and it was recovered still by the Broncos, but it still led to a field goal attempt. And then on the ensuing play, the field goal attempt was actually blocked by Max Crosby, who has had a really great game. I think he had 2 sacks on the day, and that blocked field goal, excellent performance on his part. So just not really getting the job done. And again, Russell Wilson is probably going to have to stick around in Denver. I don't think they're going to get away from that contract. So Nathaniel Hackett's going to have to pay the price, and they'll have to see if they can reset this roster with a new voice in their locker. Well, the most exciting matchup on this slate of Week 11 games was definitely the Minnesota Vikings and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, definitely was a total letdown as the Cowboys dominated this game from start to finish, just even from opening possession, as Micah Parsons just beat his man around and forced a strip sack of Kirk Cousins. In the second quarter, Dallas really separated themselves as they utilized Tony Pollard and a lot of good passing options that they have, and Dak Prescott responded from having a mediocre game from the Green Bay Packers game a week before. So really impressive. I mean, this is the explosive Dallas team that we're used to seeing, and I think this means that Minnesota is more of a pretender than a contender. I know that they're coming off a great win against Buffalo, but they had to really pull off a couple miracles just to even win that game. And now their two losses have been both by teams in the NFC East, both of them blowouts, and the rest have been against mediocre competition and then squeaking by, excluding that Bills win. So I don't know what to make of this team. Again, this is Kirk Cousins playing the Dallas Cowboys, and he's actually 2-9 now against the Dallas Cowboys, and only beaten Dak Prescott once in his 5 matchups so far. And I think for the Vikings, they'll still get into the postseason. They'll be probably the 2 seed. If they end up playing these Cowboys again or the San Francisco 49ers, I think that's going to be a buzzsaw of a matchup, and they could end up being in the postseason for a very short time. For Dallas, this defense had a great day. They had 7 sacks. I think this defensive line, when applied, they can be an elite unit. With Lawrence, they have Micah Parsons, Dorrance Armstrong. I think Armstrong has made great strides this season and should be a Pro Bowler, or at least get some consideration to be a Pro Bowler this year. Just so talented across the board. And if they continue to play like this, they'll be probably the most dangerous threat to the Eagles in the NFC. So clearly the most talented or most explosive player that Dallas has on offense is Tony Pollard. He had almost 200 yards from scrimmage, 2 long receiving touchdowns, and he's just a better running back at this moment in time compared to Ezekiel Elliott. I know Zeke has the big contract, and Jerry's going to have him starting as many games as possible to deem that decision that he made 3 years ago as a good decision, but still, you have to look at the tape and see that Zeke is just not the same guy. He's great in short yardage situations, but he shouldn't be getting as many touches, and those touches should be going to Tony Pollard as much as possible. Pollard is the faster back. He can do more things. I think the only hole in this game has been pass protection, as Zeke has been great in pass protection. He's been such a force in protecting Dak Prescott and being a nice power back in short yardage situations. He actually had 2 rushing touchdowns as well, so it's not like he was totally uninvolved, but he only averaged less than 3 yards a carry in this game, just not good enough production. So I think moving forward, Tony Pollard should be the starting back, and they should do everything that they can to re-sign him, but I don't know if they can afford him. Regardless, Tony Pollard is going to get a bag next year, whether it's with the Cowboys or another team that's looking for a running back. He's been looking really good. And then Zeke, I think Dallas would have to cut him to save some money, but I don't know exactly what his cap is going to be next season. But Zeke is best days are behind him, and Tony Pollard should be the future running back in Dallas. So on the Sunday night game, it was a matchup between the LA Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Really good game. I thought that the Chargers had some advantages in this game. They were the more desperate team. They got Mike Williams coming back, Keenan Allen's back. They're sort of getting healthy at the right time, but also taking advantage of Kansas City's injury problems, as Mecole Hardman had to miss this game. Also, Kadarius Toney was injured in this game, so he had to leave. And then Juju Smith-Schuster, who's in concussion protocol, had to miss this game as well. So really it was like Travis Kelce and whoever else was healthy to help out Patrick Mahomes, but still proved to be a big issue for the Chargers, as the Chiefs were led by Travis Kelce, who had such a dominant performance, a hat trick of touchdowns, a lot of them in different ways, mostly yards after the catch. Very similar to that performance last year where he had a catch and run and kind of ran through the entire Chargers defense. It's sad to see that such an uber talented team like the Chargers are continuing to be snake bitten by bad coaching, injuries. They have a generational talent in Justin Herbert. I'm a huge fan of his, but I think this might be a season where he may not make the postseason again. Now, their schedule moving forward, they have a chance to get back into the playoff mix, but 5-5, it's really tough sledding. But New England and the Jets are probably the teams I think that they can look to supersede and get into that 7th spot. But they have a lot of work to do. They still have to get healthy and overcome some adversity. But regardless, the biggest thing that happened in this game is Travis Kelce, and that he should be considered as the best tight end of all time. I know Gronk has had that title for a plethora of years. It's remarkable that they're a similar age, but he's been so dominant in such a limited amount of time in Gronk. But Kelce has been healthy, he's been consistent, and honestly getting better as each year goes on. And now he's truly the undisputed #1 option in this Chiefs offense. And I think his numbers are continuing to be inflated and improve as the season wears out. The knock against Kelce is probably that he's just not a good blocker compared to Rob Gronkowski. Gronkowski is probably the more typical tight end who can block, he can help out in the running game, and then also be such a dominant red zone target, which he was. And I think that's definitely some valid credit there. But the thing that knocks me about Gronk is just his availability. It's just so much there, but in such little amount of time. He's missed a lot of games, a lot of postseasons due to his injury history. Kelce's been consistently more reliable, and I think if that continues in this trajectory that is happening right now with Travis Kelce, he should be eclipsing a lot of Gronkowski's stats and then moving himself up with Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, a couple other tight ends who are just up there in statistically as one of the best tight ends. But we'll see what happens. But I think this is a conversation that we really need to have for the best tight end of all time. So on Monday Night Football, the San Francisco 49ers took on the Arizona Cardinals, and this game was actually played in Mexico City as part of the NFL's International Series. Honestly, a total dismantling of the Arizona Cardinals, as the 49ers seem to be firing on all cylinders now. They have Deebo Samuel back. CMC really got involved in the game. Brandon Ayuk had a couple touchdowns. And then George Kittle, who had a great game. He had 2 touchdowns, a lot of yak yards. And if this is the 49ers team that we expect to see going forward, I think the NFC really has to be concerned about this team. Them, the Cowboys, they're going to prove to be a big threat to teams like the Eagles and the Vikings, who are right now at the top of the NFC. For my players of the week, I really have to give it to Travis Kelce. We just talked about him being arguably the greatest tight end of all time, but I also think that he just had a phenomenal game. I mean, 3 touchdowns is really hard to outcompete. So impactful against the LA Chargers. And then for my defensive player of the week, I'm going to name Micah Parsons. I mean, he really set the tone against the Minnesota Vikings with that opening drive strip sack, and had another sack later in the game. So 2 sacks, a forced fumble, really having a defensive player of the year type of campaign. And then my teams of the week, I'm going to name the Dallas Cowboys, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Kansas City Chiefs. All had great wins, mostly dominant, but especially with the Chiefs being able to come back after not really having any other options other than Mahomes and Travis Kelce. That proves to be the most dominant duo in the league today. So credit to them. And overall, these 3 teams have had really good weeks so far, and I look forward to seeing what they can pull moving forward. So moving on to the NBA, Golden State finally looks to be getting back on track. They had a more positive week since their last episode, where they went 3-2 during that time span, including a first win on the road against the Houston Rockets. And in this game, Klay Thompson finally broke out of this season-long slump, at least for now, and he had 10 3-pointers and 41 points. Definitely his best performance in months, probably since the finals. Really good play out of him. Steph has been super consistent and definitely eclipsing 30 points like it's no problem. And Wiggins as well has been a reliable second option for them. So they still have some issues in terms of shoring up the defense, as they lost to the Phoenix Suns by more than 10 points with Steph Curry going off for 50 points. There's just no one there to help them out, and their defense is still having some issues, but I think they can slowly start to turn this around and get back into the playoff mix as they're trying to fix their early season woes. And another thing I'm noticing so far in this NBA season is a lot of big injuries are happening already. I mean, we saw James Harden, he's going to be missing some time with that foot sprain, and that's pretty bad for the Sixers, as now they've also losing Tyrese Maxey, and also Joel Embiid is going to be missing a couple games this week due to a mid-foot sprain as well. So the injury bug is biting them for sure, particularly the Sixers. We also see Damian Lillard, he's going to be missing a couple more weeks now with a leg injury. Also, he's been in and out of the lineup before, so the Trailblazers have to make an adjustment, but I think that's a good opportunity for Arne Simons, as he's been getting a lot of good quality minutes and going to be consistently being the more number one option moving forward. And then in LA, we see obviously Kawhi Leonard. He's been in and out. He made a return against the Detroit Pistons last week. And then Paul George is going to be missing some time too, as he's been banged up as well. And then also with the Lakers, LeBron has been missing some time with that soft tissue growing injury. So injuries across the league, but it's allowed for opportunities for other players. So particularly with the Lakers, with LeBron being out, it's allowed Russ to kind of be a little bit more productive. He's been a lot more solid. Lonnie Walker has been pretty solid, I think, in terms of the third best scorer on this team, maybe fourth best, but consistently getting into 17 points and above. And then Anthony Davis, I mean, he's actually playing very good elite level big man basketball. I mean, I've been waiting for these opportunities, and now I know that there's not a lot of expectations, so that's one thing to consider in this nice little uptick in his career so far, but just been so dominant. And actually the Lakers have won 3 consecutive games to this point. They're coming off a 30-point win over the San Antonio Spurs. Not the best of competition, and still they're well below 500, but a lot better quality play for the Lakers as they try to make amends for the earlier season mishaps in this season. So I think it's also time to give the Kings a shout out here, as the Kings, who have been in a huge playoff drought. I think it's been since 2006 since they made the postseason. So it's been a long time, but finally they seem to be breaking through, and as long as they stay healthy, I mean, this acquisition of Domantas Sabonis has been good for them, but they're really led by De'Aaron Fox, and I've been a huge fan of Swipa since his days at Kentucky. I still hold the Lakers accountable for not drafting him number 2 overall, or even Jason Tatum at that point in time. So he's been every much better than Lonzo Ball could ever hope and dream to be, and he's been doing so well this season, particularly also from his jump shot and shooting from the outside, as he's shooting about 37% so far this year. And if they can continue to play like this, he should make his first All-Star team, and the Kings' playoff drought will be over. So I'm really hoping for these up-and-coming stories for teams like the Kings to return to the postseason. So the last thing I wanted to get into is this beef between Giannis and the city of Philadelphia. So on Friday night, the Bucks took an L to the Philadelphia 76ers, and a lot had to do with Giannis missing a lot of free throws as he finished the night 4 out of 15, so not so good. He decided to get some extra shots after the game in like a post-game workout, so he was taking free throw attempts. In the process of that, there was a issue with him and the stadium staff, as a ladder was knocked over in the process. Also, there was something to do with Montrezl Harrell, where he came out of nowhere, out of the tunnel, and started jawing at Giannis. Trez has been an interesting personality, to say the least, as he's been a tough guy. You know, we've seen him have beef with Luka in the past. He's gotten into disputes as the enforcer of teams, like with the Clippers back in the day. So same thing kind of happened here, where he had some random beef with Giannis. So this is actually something that Giannis does pretty consistently, these post-game workouts, as Many people from Pfizer Forum, the stadium that the Bucks play in for their home games, said that this is a normal thing for Giannis. You can see in the receipts here. Numerous people came to defense of Giannis Antetokounmpo. Really interesting to see, because a lot of NBA Twitter started getting on Giannis as a villain in this, particularly Philadelphia fans. Really, really sad to see. I just don't think he deserved that. Giannis has been a class act since he's entered the league, a humble kid from Greece. And to have this kind of reputation tarnished, or attempt to tarnish him, is a very classless move by the Philadelphia fans. So I don't expect an apology from them. I know that a lot of people, even reporters, were saying that he was being a bum or being, extra to that extent. So very disappointed. But regardless, Giannis is going to persevere. He's just going to move on and be the player that he is, which we know is one of the best players this league has ever seen. So moving on to the World Cup, and on the opening night we had Ecuador taking on host Qatar. This is the first time that a host nation has ever lost their opening match, and I guess it turns out that oil money and bribing players to join your soccer team doesn't turn into victories. Who would have thought? But anyways, credit to Ecuador. I mean, Enner Valencia, it was a great pleasure to see him. He nearly had a hat trick, but one of those goals were taken off the board thanks to this newly implemented technology in VAR that utilized ways to analyze offsides and goals. So very cool new implement to this aspect of the tournament, but still Enner Valencia finished the game off with a brace, very productive play. And based off of that, I really think that Ecuador has a good chance to make the knockout stage, as their group rivals Senegal took a loss to the Dutch on Monday, where they lost 2-0. Both goals were surrendered in the last 10 minutes of play, and the Dutch really looked quiet to start off. I mean, I think this was heading to a 0-0 draw, and they scored a winner and then added injury to insult with a stoppage time goal. That's going to really hurt the Senegalese side as they're trying to make this knockout stage without their star player Sadio Mane. Moving on to Group B, England looked phenomenal in their play as their young attackers really got going with Jude Bellingham, Raheem Sterling. Just excellent play. Bukayo Saka had a brace in this game. Phenomenal play from a lot of younger players on this side, even though Harry Kane had a quiet game. And with them winning 6-2, that's putting them in great chances to make the knockout stage already. In Group B, it was a really good game between Wales and Team USA. USA got out to an early lead thanks to Tim Weah running the break, thanks to an assist by Christian Pulisic. He was great in this game for the most part, but they showed that they really have issues with referees. Now, I think the refereeing in this game was interesting. A lot of interesting calls in terms of consistency. They let Welsh players lay down on the ground and stop play, but then if Americans were hurt, they didn't allow that. Interesting foul calls, a lot of harsh yellow cards for the Americans. But still, I got to give credit when credit is due. And the Welsh side showed up when necessary and salvaged a point thanks to a penalty in the 82nd minute. And it was converted thanks to their superstar, Gareth Bale. I knew that he would be a danger man, and he converted for the equalizer. So both teams are very much alive in this World Cup for the knockout stages. So I think it's going to come down to which team either loses to England the least in terms of goal differential, as that's a key tiebreaker for that second spot in the knockout stages, and then which team also potentially beats up on Iran and how bad they do it. So the Americans are thankful that they have a point, but they easily could have won this match, and it will be interesting to see how they face England on Friday. And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody in the USA. And until next time, take care and stay safe.